So welcome. We're exploring rhetorical criticism, and in our first set of lessons, we focused on that idea of criticism. We looked at its divisions and subdivisions, and in this set of lessons, we're going to be focusing on rhetoric, the sort of rhetorical aspect of rhetorical criticism. Before we do that, let's do a quick review and refresh our memory and see what we learned about criticism. Really quickly, we ended up with a definition of criticism. We said criticism is a process of making reasoned judgments, and we said essentially criticism was going to be looking carefully at some rhetorical artifact. We noted that we will have methods, and a method will guide that process of reasoning. And when we get to the place where we're making judgments, where we're drawing together and drawing conclusions out of what we've found through thinking our way through reasoning about the artifact, that theory would guide our judgment. We talked about in rhetoric, there are a whole host of different methods, and each of them will have a different sort of lens or perspective, and each of them will show you different aspects, different things going on inside the rhetorical artifact you're looking at. So we have a wide array of methods that we can choose from. We also said that when we get to the process where we're closing down and we're making our judgment calls, there are essentially two major schools of thought about the theories that will guide our judgment. We said that basically you can have constitutive or constructivist or subjectivist theories, and then there's also mimetic or objectivist theories. The constitutive theory thinks of language as essentially a tool for building, for assembling some outcome that we're looking for. So the constitutive emphasizes the power of language to build things, to bring things into existence. The mimetic takes a slightly different theoretical view. It says, hey, there are realities that are out there. You can't, just build everything. I mean, there are certain things that are just true, like it or not, real, like it or not. And that our job, the job of the critic and the job of the rhetorical artist, is to create a kind of mimesis, a representation of those realities that are out there. And that's essentially what criticism does. So if we've been thinking in terms of criticism, let's begin now to turn our attention over to the rhetoric part of this equation. To begin there, I want to start with a question. And it's not an original question. It's a question that I've lifted from the writings of an Oxford scholar, and I consider it one of the most profound and insightful questions ever raised in English literature. And it's a really penetrating question. If you want to get to the heart of rhetoric, this is the question that you have to grapple with, all right? That question is, what have I got in my pocket? Now, if you miss the reference, that's the question that Bilbo Baggins asks of the creature Gollum in The Hobbit. And if you miss the significance of that question, well, that would be easy to miss. Let's talk a little bit about that question. First of all, it's obviously raised by J.R.R. Tolkien, who was a profound philological rhetorical scholar at Oxford. He studied language and how language works. I don't think Tolkien had the profundity of the question in mind when he framed it into his young people's story about the Hobbit, Bilbo Baggins. But I think it's a great launching place. Okay, it's a good place to start, because if someone raises the question, hey, what do you think I've got in my pocket? Well, we can immediately learn a lot about rhetoric by studying that question. So what do you think somebody might have in their pocket? They might have keys. Keys is a pretty common guess. So maybe somebody's carrying around a set of keys in their pocket. That would be perfectly logical. They may have change. If you lose coins down in their pocket, sure, that makes sense too. That's perfectly possible. Maybe they're carrying around a little penknife. I mean, those are not as common today as they used to be, but certainly people still have, little nail files and pen knives down in their pocket. So any of that is a really rich possibility. So when somebody says, what do you think I've got in my pocket? Well, here we go. We've got possibilities in front of us. We have laid out options. One of these, more of these, maybe something else, but we're beginning to explore realistic options. Now, if we want to learn about rhetoric, the thing we want to focus on here is not necessarily the things people are going to guess. We want to stop for a second and we want to remember, think about, consider the things that people don't guess about what I've got in my pocket. Nobody is ever going to say to you, well, perhaps the planet Saturn. Maybe you've got Saturn in your pocket. That's what you've got in your pocket. Almost certainly, if you ask the question, hey, what do you think I've got in my pocket? Nobody is going to tell you, I think you have the cremated remains of your German Shepherd dog in your pocket. That would be weird, and almost certainly not what anybody is going to guess off the top of their heads. What do you think I've got in my pocket? Nobody is going to say, well, I think you've got all the love in the world in your pocket. That's what you're carrying around in your pocket. It's love. Okay, so why? Why is it that when I ask, what do you think I've got in my pocket? Things like keys and change come to mind, but the planet Saturn and all the love in the world doesn't come to mind. Why? Well, there is a really profound answer to that question. It is because those are really stupid answers. Okay? It's completely outside the scope of most human experience, and in 2 cases at least, outside the entire scope of possibility that I would be carrying that around in my pocket. So those are stupid answers. So we just toss them out. Okay, now we're starting to get somewhere. We are noticing that some answers are not stupid, and some answers are stupid. It's not stupid to say that I've got keys in my pocket. Okay, that's just really quite reasonable. No problem there whatsoever. Wouldn't be stupid to say I'm carrying a penknife around. Sure, maybe so. It's not stupid to say I've got change in my pocket. Yeah, sure, okay. So when we raise that question, what have I got in my pocket? It begins to shape our perspective, and it begins to narrow our focus down. In fact, it's a pretty good clue about what rhetoric focuses on. Rhetoric, in its foundation, deals with uncertainty in human life, but not stupidity. Okay. So basically, rhetoric deals with things in our human experience, in our human life, that might be one way, or it might be the other way. It could go a couple of different directions here, and we're not absolutely certain which direction it's going to go. So maybe it's keys, maybe it's change, maybe it's a penknife, maybe it's something else. But I may have nail clippers, I may have a bit of string, who knows, a receipt from yesterday, a cell phone. Any of those things would be perfectly reasonable answers. And that's what rhetoric focuses on. It focuses on those moments where there are some real and realistic options that we could face. Uncertainty is at the center of what rhetoric does. Rhetoric deals with uncertainty. And that means that rhetoric is never going to lead us to knowledge. So wrap our minds around that. When we finish with something, a rhetorical analysis or a rhetorical enterprise, or when somebody stands up and makes a presentation, a commercial, a political speech, proposes to us to marry, none of that guarantees anything. And when we're done with the process, we cannot say that we know anything. That is not our realm. Rhetoric doesn't deal with knowledge. Rhetoric deals with possibility, not knowledge. And so, let's take a second and get a closer look at what it is we don't do, because knowing what we aren't doing will be very, very helpful in understanding what we are doing. So knowledge basically focuses on things that we can absolutely prove. You remember our discussion when we were talking about criticism? We talked about science. Science can get duplicable results, right? You can do it over and over again. You get the same answer. Okay, that's the kind of thing we're talking about here. We can say we know things when the evidence is overwhelming. Something can be absolutely proven. That's the realm of knowledge. We say we know something when virtually everyone who can understand the evidence, so everybody who can understand the evidence that led to that conclusion, they draw the same conclusion. So virtually everybody who can understand the evidence that brought this conclusion to the foreground, when they look at the evidence, they draw the same conclusion. So when everybody is getting the same answer, who understands the evidence that led here, that's when we say, okay, we know that. Now, knowledge happens when we get it, when we understand something. But of course, what happens if down the road a little bit, we say, hey, we now understand it a little better? Who gets to come along and say, hey, you say you know this, but I don't think you know it as well as you think you do? Who gets to challenge what we say we know? That's a really good question, and it's a crucial question to understand in the realm of knowledge. In the realm of knowledge, you only get to challenge our conclusions when you have proven to us that you thoroughly understand the evidence that led to that conclusion. Remember that idea, virtually everyone who can understand the evidence arrives at the same conclusion? Well, okay. Everybody who understands the evidence draws this conclusion. And then all of a sudden somebody pops up and says, you know what? I thoroughly understand the evidence that led to this conclusion. I really do. Here, I can show you. I can prove to you that I know the reasoning and I understand the evidence that got us here. But I think we're wrong. Okay, now that happens, but it only happens once somebody has shown to us that they understand how we got to what we say we know. Now, most of the time, when somebody is going to challenge knowledge, in the realm of knowledge, if you're going to say, hey, you got it wrong, that's almost always going to happen in one of two ways, all right? If you want to challenge knowledge after you've proven you understand the reasoning and the evidence that got us to that conclusion, usually somebody comes along and says, yeah, I see the reasoning that you've got here. But you know what? In step two, I think you're overemphasizing what happened there. I don't think it's quite as important as you say it is. Let me explain to you why. All right, so that's one way to challenge knowledge. Another way is, of course, to say the opposite. Hey, you missed something. I understand the reasoning that led here, but you left this out. You never thought to look here. And here's more information, more data, more perspective that we can bring in, and that will change what we know. So basically, overemphasizing something or underemphasizing something, that's usually the way that people with knowledge challenge knowledge. The people who understand how we got to the conclusions, when they challenge knowledge, they usually challenge knowledge by saying, hey, too much emphasis on this, you left this out. That's the way we do it. Now, one of the things that's wonderful about knowledge is that the evidence that goes into making us say we know that evidence is public. What we mean by that is anybody can go get that. In a free society, in a society like ours, a free society, anybody can go get the evidence that led to that conclusion. Anybody can look at it. You can go get PRL. You can get a physical review letter, and you can open it. You can read the Astrophysical Journal. You can read the New England Journal of Medicine. You can pick these up, and you can yourself go read the evidence that led to that conclusion. So that's wonderful, and that's spectacular. But there's a flip side to that, okay? Let's not get crazy here. Let's make sure we understand. Yes, anyone can access that data, that evidence that led to the conclusion, but that doesn't mean everybody can understand it, right? So in my world, my beloved is a nuclear physicist. So she understands things that I have absolutely no grasp of whatsoever. She studies how things turn around. As best I can figure it, she's talking about how things spin inside some part of an atom. And that's really all I know about it. Okay, now, could I challenge what she says she knows about physics? Well, of course not. Why? Because even if she presented the evidence to me, I would not be able to understand it. I would never be able to work through the calculations she works through to show the kinds of proofs and mathematical knowledge and experiment. She's acquainted with physics experiments, and I don't understand any of that. So I can never challenge her knowledge. I don't get to go in and say, you know what, you physicists, I think you got it all wrong. Now, why don't I get to do that? Well, because I don't understand their evidence. And until I understand the evidence that led to their conclusions, I don't get to challenge their conclusions. That's the rule. Okay, that's just how the game is played. You don't get to challenge the conclusion until you can show that you know how that conclusion got formed. All right, I never will because I will never understand that evidence. All right, so there we are. The evidence is public. Anyone can access it, but it doesn't follow that everyone can understand it. All right, so let's sum up a little bit here about this world of knowledge. All right, we say we know something when virtually everyone who can understand the evidence arrives at the same conclusion. We say you only get to challenge knowledge, claims of knowledge, that they can only be challenged when you have shown. You don't get to challenge knowledge until you have shown that you thoroughly understand the evidence that led to that conclusion. Usually when we're going to challenge, we challenge by saying, hey, you overemphasize something or you underemphasize something. That's usually the way how we understand the world. What we know about the world usually moves forward on one of those two axes. That's how knowledge works. It does not follow that that's how rhetoric works. Rhetoric deals with areas of uncertainty. It does not lead to knowing a thing that can be absolutely proven. So rhetoric doesn't get us to knowledge. So that's one thing that we've got to put in our pocket. When we're talking about rhetoric, we're not talking about knowledge. Now, rhetoricians can use knowledge, of course, things that we know, to help build cases and show that one thing is likely and another thing is not. Think back to my keys, right? You can use what you know about how the world works and use what you know about the planet Saturn to pretty quickly draw conclusions that I don't have Saturn in my pocket, right? So knowledge is helpful to us in rhetoric, but that's not the realm of rhetoric. It's not what rhetoric does. It's not what we function on. But if that's an area where rhetoric does not work, there's a second area too, where rhetoric does not work. Rhetoric's not about personal preference, okay? It's not about something you want. So let's much more briefly take another look at something rhetoric does not do, okay? Rhetoric is not about your personal preferences. Personal preferences are your own private, what you like, what you want, what you desire, your hierarchies. You want three things, but this is the one I want the most. That's a hierarchy. When we're talking about hierarchies here, we're talking very much about your own personal preferences, your personal hierarchies. Like, you like chocolate ice cream more than you like vanilla ice cream, right? Some people are beach people. Other people are mountain people, all right? So, you go see a movie and you say, wow, I saw that movie and you know what? I kind of like that movie. It was kind of cool. Or maybe you say, I don't know. I didn't care that much for it. Or maybe your conclusion is that you really dislike the movie. Okay. Those are personal preferences. Personal preferences are just your own private responses, your gut level feelings. All right. Your gut level reactions to the world. What do you like? What do you not like? What do you want? What do you desire? How do you rank things? That's the issue. Preferences in this context are very personal, they're very private, they're very individual. Now, think about that for a moment. Your preferences are private, personal, individual tastes. That's all, nothing else. So what's the evidence for your personal preference? You're the evidence for your personal preference, right? It's your own private feeling. If you set out and say, hey, I'm a chocolate ice cream person, I have absolutely no way I could ever say to you, oh, no, you're not possible. No, your private feelings, your own private desires, that's the only ground for establishing your personal preferences. I'm a chocolate ice cream person. I'm a mountain person. Yeah, I saw that movie. Yeah, it was all right, but it wasn't great. All of that is based on your own personal preference. So your private feelings are the case for your personal, they're the evidence for your personal preferences. You don't have any reasons for this. You don't need any reasons. Okay? So rhetoric doesn't deal with knowing, and it doesn't deal with personal preference. So what does it deal with? I mean, what is rhetoric about? Well, it's a good question. Rhetoric doesn't lead to knowledge. It doesn't deal with personal preference, but it is a well-grounded sense of confidence. Rhetoric deals with conviction, all right? It's not knowledge, it's not private preference, it's conviction, a sense of confidence. Okay, so that just simply doesn't help, does it? Not until we know what conviction is. Okay, let's go back to our old friends, the Greeks. The word in Greek is pistis, the word in Latin is fides. And in the Greek frame, this means confidence. It means trust, a faith in, that's what we mean by confidence. That's what we mean by conviction. A conviction is your belief, your faith, your trust, but it isn't just personal preference. It's not arbitrary choice. It's not like it's irrelevant. That's not what we mean at all. That isn't a conviction. If it doesn't matter and you don't have any really good reasons one way or the other, we're not talking about convictions. We're talking about personal preferences. That's not, absolutely not, rhetoric. Rather, rhetoric is in the realm of uncertainty, and it basically focuses on human convictions, confidence, faith, trust that we have about some idea, but that confidence is backed up with good reasons. It's not arbitrarily chosen. We didn't flip a coin. We came to this conviction, this matter of confidence, of faith, of trust. We came to that with good reasons, but there's no absolute proof. If there was absolute proof, it'd be knowledge. We wouldn't need conviction. So we live in a realm, in the world of rhetoric, where we are looking at human convictions, the things they have confidence, faith, trust in. And we're looking at the reasons they give for embracing that faith, that trust, that confidence. So when we think about the question, what have I got in my pocket? It's not really hard now to look back and say, well, how much confidence, how much conviction, how much trust would you put in me if you said, hey, what do you got in your pocket? And I said, the planet Saturn. Well, I mean, if I gave you that response, how much confidence could you have in my answer? Well, I can tell you, you would have zero confidence in my answer, right? If you ask me, what have you got in here? And I say, I am carrying all the love in the world in my pocket. Again, your response would be, okay, no, you're not. Obviously, you're not doing that. There's zero confidence there, all right? If you say, so what do you got in your pocket there? And I said, I am carrying around the cremated remains of my dearly beloved dog. Well, okay, that's not out of the realm of possibility, but probably that's not the kind of thing people keep in their pockets most of the time. Your confidence in that answer, I hope, would be very, very, very extremely low. So that's just not a place where any kind of confidence can be generated. But if you said, hey, what do you got in your pocket? And I said, well, keys. Well, I mean, yeah, actually, that's reasonable. That's fairly likely, in fact, because, if I left my car, if I left my home, my office, I locked it up, I got keys on me. So yeah, probably I do have keys in my pocket. So that's fairly likely. Okay, so good. You could have a fairly high degree of confidence if that was my response. If I said, well, I'm carrying a pen knife, I got a pen knife. Well, I don't know. Maybe, I guess so. Like I say, it's much more common a while back that people carried pen knives around with them. But I'm an old man. Maybe so. Yeah, sure. That's reasonable. I could put some confidence on that. Change? Yeah, I got some coins. Well, okay. I mean, where else would I have my coins? Okay, it's somewhere in my pocket. Okay, so that makes some sense. So that's the sort of thing rhetoric focuses on. Rhetoric focuses on those things where there are reasons for you to offer some confidence. That's rhetoric. So let's sum this up where we've gone so far. There are basically three different arenas of human experience that we've talked about, three parts of our intellect, of our interior life. We've said there are things we know, That stuff, we can absolutely prove that stuff. Everybody can look at the evidence, and if they understand the evidence, they go, yeah, okay, yeah, that's exactly where that evidence leads. Okay, that's knowledge. That's great. In addition, this part of us inside also carries around desires, things that we prefer, things that we like. Okay, we don't have any real reasons for these things, but then we don't need any real reasons for those things. All they are is just the status of what is down inside me going, want that. Okay, so yeah, we don't have evidence for that. We don't need evidence for that other than the fact that, yeah, that's what we want. But then between these two, things we can absolutely prove and things that we just arbitrarily prefer for some reason, there is the realm of conviction. These are things we have a measure of confidence in, pretty good measure of confidence in. Our beliefs, our acceptance, our trust, our conviction is based on good reasons. Now, they're not so good that they're knowledge. They're not so good that we can absolutely unquestionably prove that this is true. It's not that kind of a belief. We don't have that kind of a belief. We have rather conviction, faith, confidence in our conclusions. If I have confidence in my conclusions, I can give you reasons for them. That's what rhetoric focuses on. It focuses on the giving of reasons for forming convictions, confidence, faith. So if the question comes up, should you vote for candidate Quirolus or should you vote for candidate Stultus? Well, you might just make that decision based on your own arbitrary preference. I don't know. I just like the way Stultus looks. Let's go with Stultus. Okay, there's no reason there. That's just your gut level feeling talk. But if we begin to talk and you say, well, I tend to lean towards Stultus because I like the way he approaches the idea of education, and I think that's a really important issue. So now all of a sudden, the second we begin to give reasons for our choices, they cease to be preferences. The things you prefer that don't have any actual reasons for them, those things become convictions the moment you begin giving reasons. If you give a reason, we've moved out of the realm of preference. So let me give you an example. I got a buddy of mine, lives in New Orleans, chef, okay? Good chef, okay? If you know anything about New Orleans, you know they got a lot of things going for them down there. Good food is on the list, all right? So this is a guy who's a chef. He's worked in some top restaurants inside of the circuit in New Orleans. So you ask him about chocolate. Hey, you like chocolate or vanilla better? His answer is going to be chocolate, hands down. And you go, okay, why? You just like chocolate? And he's going to say to you, no. It's not that I like chocolate. It's that chocolate, real chocolate, good chocolate, has this balance between a bitter and a savory. And it's that tension, that balance between those two that creates a space that brings out so many other flavors. So if you just take a dash of chocolate and you mix it in with a certain kind of sauce that you're making here that's going to go in your jambalaya, all of a sudden you're going to catch subtleties in the flavors that you would. Okay, now hold it. This is not a guy who's got an arbitrary preference for chocolate. This is a guy who knows why he thinks chocolate is better than vanilla, because he'll tell you, you put vanilla in there, it flattens the flavors. It just turns everything into sacra, just sweet. It overwhelms everything. Chocolate opens flavors up. Vanilla shuts flavors down. Okay, I don't know. Okay, I can't tell you that this is true because I do not have any skill whatsoever at cooking, okay? That world's out of my realm like the world of physics. But all of a sudden, I'm listening to a person who is giving me reasons. And those reasons build trust. They build faith. They make me have faith in him. When I listen to him, I go, this sounds like a guy who knows what he's talking about. Wow, maybe chocolate is better if you're cooking. Okay, confidence. beliefs based on good reasons, though you can't absolutely prove that those beliefs are true. The minute we begin giving reasons to back up what we believe, what we say, what we think, then we have moved out of the realm of knowledge, out of the realm of preference, and we are now in the realm of rhetoric. The realm of rhetoric is that realm in which our convictions are presented based on the good reasons we have, though we honestly acknowledge there's no absolute proof. That is what rhetorical criticism is going to be making its reasoned judgments about, the convictions and the reasons to back up those convictions. Rhetoric and convictions, then, are going to need a little bit more exploration, and we're going to do that in our next lesson.